Iranians on Wednesday gathered in Tehran to mourn the death of Ali Larijani. The procession also commemorated the head of Iran's Basij volunteer paramilitary force, Gholam Reza Soleimani, who was killed on Tuesday. It also commemorated the sailors of the Dena ship who were killed by a US torpedo off the coast of Sri Lanka earlier this month. Israel announced on Wednesday that they'd also killed Iran's intelligence minister, Esmail Khatib. The New York Times has a striking map which shows exactly who in Iran's leadership has been assassinated so far. Most of those killed were members of the defense establishment who were killed alongside Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei on the first day of the war. Aside from Khamenei, Larijani is the most senior political leader to have been killed so far. So will this decapitation strategy against the Islamic Republic work? And what are Israel even trying to achieve? Earlier, I spoke to Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute, an author of Losing an Enemy on Obama's Nuclear Deal and Treacherous Alliance on the History of Relations between Israel and Iran.
So the decapitation strategy by Israel and secondary by the United States has definitely managed to achieve some tactical successes for Israel and the United States. But so far, we have not seen those tactical successes be translated into strategic successes. The first big one, of course, was the assassination of the supreme leader. It not only did not end up becoming a strategic success, it actually became a strategic failure, because it led to a scenario in which the Iranian system actually coalesced, converged, and you also had the base of the Islamic Republic in Iran, which probably is no more than 15 to 20%, actually be quite energized. They see this as an existential fight. So you had major regime consolidation following this, rather than what the US and Israel had hoped for, which was that this would lead to regime collapse. Now, Ali Larijani is a very significant person, but also obviously not as significant as Khamenei was. Whether that will lead to collapse, we see no sign of. Whether they will be translated into strategic success, again, too early to tell. But what we can say, however, is that it is leading to a scenario in which the people that probably could play a role in a potential diplomacy that would offer Trump an off-ramp are being killed off deliberately by the Israelis. Now, whether they're only targeting them or whether they're targeting them in order to kill off the off-ramps is perhaps unknown at this point, but that is the end result. All wars end up in some form of diplomacy. This one will too. Trump is already looking for an off-ramp. He's seen that the Iranians are not interested in any talks about ceasefire. But the people within the Iranian system that would lead those talks and that would be able to play the role of ensuring that the system as a whole would go along with such an arrangement at some point are the ones that are being killed off. And if this is deliberate, that would suggest that the Israelis are deliberately trying to kill off Trump's off-ramps and making sure that it becomes increasingly difficult to be able to end this war. From the Israeli standpoint, they don't want an end to this war. They want to continue, they want to degrade Iran's industrial base. They want to destroy as much as possible of the country, not of the regime, of the country, in order to make sure that whatever happens after this war, Iran will have been set back so significantly so that its power simply will not be where it was before, and as a result cannot pose a challenge to Israel. That is their objective. It has nothing to do with democracy, has nothing to do with, frankly, even changing the regime. This is the same strategy that they've been pursuing in Gaza, in Lebanon, and other places, mowing the lawn. And it's all about making sure that the lawn is as short as possible. It doesn't matter what color the lawn is or who is in charge of the lawn. It's about mowing it. Now they're doing it on a much larger scale in Iran. And they don't want to end it prematurely. So they're worried that Trump is going to look for an off-ramp. And again, this may be the intent, it may not be, but the end effect nevertheless is that they're killing off the off-ramps.
And I want to talk about the effect of these decapitations on the Islamic Republic, because I keep hearing people say, the Iranians were prepared for this. Every person the Israelis kill, there will be someone to replace them. But surely there is an amount of sort of institutional memory, sort of personal charismatic leadership that's going to be very difficult to replace. And, if it's just the supreme leader, I can see how the system might sort of, I suppose, make up for any legitimacy that might have gone by having this charismatic leader go. But if just all of these different points of leadership are being taken out one by one, surely that's going to have a really damaging effect.
Definitely. There's no way you can say that this is not costing the Iranians a lot. In fact, it absolutely is. The question is if it's bringing about the type of collapse that either would cause the collapse of the regime or would cause the collapse of their military operations and their defenses. That's a different story. Now, you can say that, look, if this goes on for a very long time and eventually there's hardly anyone left, there's no institutional memory, the system as a whole is broken. That absolutely is a scenario that can occur. The question is, how long time will that take? And is that more time than what Trump has and what the other countries have? Now, Israel believes that it has a tremendous amount of time because its pain tolerance is very high, particularly if the US is included in the war. But the GCC states have a very limited tolerance and time. Trump himself may not have that much time because this is starting to eat away from his base as well. We just had a poll that came out this morning that showed that while the support for the war within Trump voters is still strong at 76%, nevertheless dropped about 10% in the last 2 weeks or so, you're still seeing some cracks. 79%, according to our poll, would be very happy if Trump just declared victory right away and ended this war. 60 or so percent, if I remember correctly, are dead set against any ground troops. And many of them, a majority, are also worried about gas prices going up. So you're starting to see that the things that Trump should be worried about are starting to happen. They won't happen right away. He probably has a couple of more weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, before this pain is becoming a main problem. But it's going to take more than 2 or 3 weeks for the Israelis to do the type of assassinations that actually would have the impact that you're talking about. Take a look at what happened in Hezbollah. In Hezbollah's case, the Israelis actually took out a very large number of their commanders and leaders, and blew them up through those pagers. Tremendous intelligence work that led to a very large number of the leaders and a very, very large number of civilians getting killed. But now Hezbollah is back. They have completely reorganized. They have completely changed their tactics in the war. And Israel is facing some significant challenges in Lebanon right now. And that's just an organization. That's not a state. So I think that while theoretically what you're saying is absolutely possible, and perhaps that point can be reached, the question is, can that point be reached before the global economy collapses, before the GCC states essentially cannot continue where they are right now, before Trump's base turns against Israel?
And I suppose on the theme of the world economy potentially collapsing and pressure on the GCC states, today Iran's South Pass gas field was attacked, the largest gas field in the world. Qatar has come out strongly against this strike done by the Israelis, apparently with collaboration from the Americans. What's your interpretation of this development?
The Israelis are trying to expand the war further. They want the Iranians to strike back at the GCC states. They want to drag the GCC states into this war. That gas field, the reason why the Qataris are saying something about this is because half of that gas field is Qatar's gas field. There's no border that delineates that gas field. It's a gas field. And the Qataris are the only ones that actually right now are extracting gas from it in a large amount because the Iranians, because of sanctions, don't have the technology to do so. So this is effort at actually expanding the war, forcing the GCC to come in on America and Israel's side. The Qataris are very much resisting this. They don't want this to happen because they believe that at the end of that war, if they're involved in it, they're going to be forced to go along with the Abraham Accord and all of these other things and ally themselves with Israel, which is something they don't want to do and their populations are dead set against. So what the Israelis are doing here is trying to force this war to become larger in the sense of more countries being forced to enter it against Iran. That's not to say that the Qataris are happy with the Iranians at all. They're very furious with the Iranians for the manner in which the Iranians have also attacked their territory. But I think it's very clear that the Iranians are retaliating against the Qataris. They're not trying to get the Qataris into the war. They're retaliating because of bases that are American bases there, etc. And I think a lot of this is very questionable from the standpoint of international law. But that's different from actually trying to get them to join into that war. I think what the rest of the region fears, of course, is that the Iranians will retaliate against this by striking at Emirati and Saudi oil facilities, which then would put further strain on the global economy.
And predictably, this has shot up the price of oil, which is something that Trump seems to see as a priority. He doesn't want the oil price to rise. He's got midterms coming up later in the year. This is the kind of thing the American public will notice. Has he judged that this gambit to try and bring the Gulf states directly into the war is worth an $8 increase in the price of a barrel of oil, or is it just, am I sort of suggesting there's more coherence coming from Washington than there actually is?
The Trump administration thought this war was going to be over within 100 hours. They told regional states, don't worry, this will be done within 4 days. They had no preparation for any of these scenarios. They had not done anything to be able to get Americans out of the GCC states. They had nothing done to prepare for flights. They have admitted that they didn't think that the Iranians were going to hit the GCC states. They admitted that they didn't think the Iranians were going to close the Strait of Hormuz. I was in meetings with former officials that were debating this issue, and I was taken aback by how many of them actually thought that there's no way the Iranians are going to close the Strait of Hormuz, because they saw that as a suicide step. They were wrong on 2 points. First of all, the Iranians view this as an existential fight. So all of the things that were off the table before are no longer off the table. Secondly, the Iranians have figured out how to close the straits for some while keeping it open for others, which is very different from the suicide option that was considered 20 years ago when the US was wargaming it, in which the Iranians would be putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is that they're essentially making it so risky to go through the straits, and they are the source of the risk, so that they only permit certain states that give them concessions to do so, whereas others are not allowed. So the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Chinese, the Russians, they can go through the straits, but it's closed for everyone else.
And what's your view on the significance of Cargill Island? It keeps coming up. Obviously, Donald Trump bombed it on Friday night, but not the oil facilities. I've seen Lindsey Graham has been out on network TV over the past 24 hours, sort of reiterating this idea that the Americans could just seize it. It does seem like it is a significant choke point. If Iran exports 90% of its oil via this terminal, then the Americans taking it out would presumably be, significantly difficult for the Iranians to handle. Do you think that will come into play?
Well, first of all, it would be devastating for the Iranians, but they have dealt with this before. During the Iraq-Iran war, the Iraqis were constantly bombing it, and the Iranians were forced to find workarounds. Whether they can find those again remains to be seen, but there's no doubt that that would be devastating for the Iranians. But their retaliation would also then be against oil installations throughout the GCC, and they have shown their ability to continue to do so, despite the fact that the U.S. keeps on saying that there's less and less drones being shot. When you talk to Gulf officials, that's not what they're saying. They feel that they're under even more fire than they were before. So I think it's very clear. The Iranians have a lot of escalatory options that they have not exercised yet. Those are even more devastating for the global economy. I think the fact that Trump only hit the military facilities and did not hit the oil installations is precisely because of an awareness that Trump too has escalatory options, but they're extremely costly for the US itself.
An Iranian official today said that Iran has sort of more advanced weapons that it is yet to deploy. And it suggested that if its gas fields are hit in the future, they will bring them into play. What kind of weapons would they be talking about? Is that ballistic missiles or?
We know that they say that they have ballistic missiles that are more advanced than the ones that they have used. We've seen that some of them may have been used, and some of the missiles that they've been using against Israel this time around that I don't think were used last time are missiles that actually change trajectory up to 90 degrees mid-air, which makes it very difficult for air defense systems to shoot them down, because those missiles are, because the manner in which you have to calculate the trajectory of that missile is thrown out the window if the missile actually has an ability to change direction. They're also using missiles that actually shoot off a larger set of missiles, smaller munitions, but nevertheless more difficult to shoot down. And we also seen that some of the missiles that they have shot actually have been intercepted, but they're so strong that they keep on flying and still hit the target. So the interceptions are not strong enough to be able to prevent those missiles. Now, if they have additional missiles or other forms of drones or weapons, short-range missiles that they could use in the Persian Gulf, etc., we have not seen. The Iranians oftentimes claim to have things that they don't, But sometimes when they claim these things, it turns out that they actually do have those things. They have, for instance, hinted that they have missiles that can shoot down and sink an American aircraft carrier. I don't know if they do have that, but I do know that the US Navy has kept itself 3,000 kilometers away from Iran's reach, precisely out of a fear that the Iranians might have those weapons.
And this discussion of sort of missiles and weaponry, it does make me think that as well as underestimating the resiliency of the political system in Iran, the Americans have potentially underestimated the industrial capacity of Iran and its sort of technical expertise. Does that sound correct to you?
There has been a massive underestimation of the Iranians on several different fronts: regime cohesion, technical capabilities, resilience, overall strength. I mean, the whole war was premised on this false notion that the Israelis very aggressively pushed for, which is that Iran is at its weakest point ever. And as a result, they have no choice but to either give up or surrender or be defeated. And as a result, Trump, this would not be a difficult thing for you. You will be the hero. You will be the one that potentially gets rid of this regime after 4 decades. This just requires a little bit of a push from you. And that's why the American side kept on telling regional states, this will only take 100 hours. We're now about to finish the 3rd week of this war.